Okay, geweldig. So yesterday, the last thing that we learned was if someone wanted to make a chazaka on nichse ager, and there were like holes or cracks or crevices in the property, and he just threw in parsnips, didn't cover them with soil, just threw them there, and eventually they grew, that wouldn't be a chazaka. Because when he threw them in to the ground, he wasn't doing anything to the land, and the land wasn't benefiting. When the land benefited, it was later on, a couple of weeks later, when they take root and they start growing, but that happened by itself. That didn't happen from his actual Maisa, which takes us to the fourth line on the top of Daf Nun Dal Amar Aleph. Amar Shmuel, Haiman the Poshach Dikla, he pruned a decal. So he had a palm tree and he pruned it, cutting off some of the branches. Adaita the Dikli. If his intent was to improve the tree, which is exactly how you make a chazaka, you do something that an owner would do to the tree to improve it, kani he'll be kaided. But if he just needed some branches to feed his animals with, so he's not doing it for the benefit of the tree, rather he's doing it for his own benefit. Then loy kani, then it would not be kaided, because that's not showing ownership on the tree. Correct the Gemara, how in the world are we going to know what he's doing? Hechadami, if he prunes the tree all around in an even fashion, adapted the dikla, that means he's doing it to benefit the tree. But kula mechad gisa, if he just takes all of the branches that he's trimming from one side, that can't be to benefit the tree, because to benefit the tree, you should be doing it all around. So that means adapted the chiyusa, he just wanted some branches for himself. That's not called improving a tree and showing bailus, and therefore the chazaka would not work. Haiman the zachi zikaya. He cleaned up. What does it mean he cleaned up? Zok tehelig harashbam. Zachi zikaya mechabed literally means to sweep. Umetaher as a soda mikisimim vasavim rom. He's pulling weeds out. He's pulling out thorns. He's cleaning up the field, making it nice and clean. In the old days, it was a painstaking work. Today, they just turn on that blower. You know, at the end when they finish mowing your lawn, they turn the blower and they blow away all the cuttings. So I'm on the Zachid Zichaya. Adaito da'ara, if the reason why he did it was again to improve the property, then kadi. Adaito the tzivi loy kadi. If he's only just trying to collect some branches for himself because he needs firewood, then he wouldn't be kadi. Hey chedam. How could you tell what it is? Shokal Ravari Vizutri, if he cleaned up all of the pieces, big and small, Adaita Da'ara. Clearly, he's trying to clean up the land and make it look good. Shokal Ravari, the Shabak Zutri, but if he only took the larger pieces, that would be helpful in his fireplace, but left the small pieces that are of no use to someone who wants to light a fire, then we know it's Adaita Tzivi, so that's not a manifestation of ownership, that's just someone collecting wood. Haman the Askil Tikla, someone who is Askil Tikla. Zokt the Rashbam. Meser HaMechshoylos. He takes away things that you could trip on. The roots. Umashve Penei Akarka. He smooths out the surface of the earth. Shetehei Chalaka. That it should be smooth. V'loi Sikoshol HaMachreisha V'sishover. So that the plow that he's going to use shouldn't break. So I guess if there could be things in the way, the plow would bang into something would break. It's mashma that it's, I don't know if these are obstacles that are under the ground. It seems like they're obstacles above the ground, but whatever it was, he's clearing a path so that when he plows the property, it should be smooth and easy, and it shouldn't damage the plow. So Zok to Gemara, Haiman the Askal Tikla, Adai the Ara, if he's doing it to benefit the land, Kani, he'll be kaina. Adai the Beidori loikan. Sometimes I don't want to plow the land. I have some grain, and I need to thresh in the winter time. I need place. So I need a flat place to do my work. So if I just wanted to clear a space to thresh some grain that I already have, that wouldn't be a show of ownership because that's not improving the property. But if you're clearing the property because you want to improve the property, that's going to be, again, a manifestation of ownership and therefore a kidney. Hey, Chedami, how can you tell? Shokal Milya Vishada bansa adaita da'ara. Mulya b'mulya, benatza benatza adaita devedari. So it seems like there's bumps in the ground. So there's places where it pops up and then pops down. So if what he does is he has a place where the soil is a little bit high, comes to a peak, like a small little hill. And what he'll do is he'll spread it out a little bit to flatten the hill, but there'll still be a hill. So he'll have now, instead of sharp points of little bumps, he has now larger flat surfaces, and then he'll have other places where there's a hole. He doesn't want to be such a deep hole, so he caves in from the side of the hole to fill in the hole a little bit. But he still has areas that are of a lower grade and areas that are higher. He doesn't have a completely smooth property, but he has larger areas of flat land that he didn't have until now, because he sort of flattened out hills and flattened out valleys. So again, if he just the Lashon word heklim, if shakamil yishadavansa, which means that he took all the hills and he put them into the holes. So now the entire property is flat. Right? So there's two ways you can do it. You could just spread out the hills, which is a little easier, or you could take all those hills, excavate them, and relocate that soil to where there's a hole. Now you'll have a completely flat football field, right? So if you did that, that's a daita d'ara. Clearly, he's doing that to benefit the entire property. But mulya b'mulya v'natza b'natza, meaning, yes, you did make the peaks a little wider, and you did make the valleys a little wider, but you still have peaks and valleys. Clearly, that's a daita d'vedori, because to winnow and to thresh, you need a nice area, but you don't need the entire field. So therefore, if he's just creating some areas that are flat, that would be a daita d'vedori, not to improve the property. Let's see the Rashbam inside. So okay, look at Rashbam. Shokal mulya v'shada benatza, daita d'ara. Lagach hatel, he took the raised area, the hill, the hishlech beguman, he took that earth and he relocated into crevices or holes. Nimtza shehish v'kolakarka. Now the entire property is one flat plain. That's perfect for planting. Hikalamemar the lachrei shasa. He made it to plow. If it's one large flat plain, that's the ideal scenario in which to plow. But mulya b'mulya v'natza b'natza, which means hatel hirchiv b'mkoymai. He did widen out the hill and made it into a larger flat surface. V'hishpilai, and he lowered it. V'noisen migavai svivasei l'tzadim. He took from the peak and he spread it around a little bit. So now it's made it into a plateau. It shouldn't come up to a point, such a high point. Rather, it's a lower level, but it's still raised. If you have a hole, instead of filling in the hole, you just caved in some of its walls. What you do is you take the sides of this pit and you cave them in and you put it in to the bottom of the pit. So it's gonna still have it. You'll still have a pit there, but it'll be a much wider pit and it won't be as deep. But that's a guma chalakim. At least the bottom of the pit has now flat ground on it. So now you have a series of flat areas, but some are higher and some are lower. Basically, you have a series of areas of flat land, but they're at different levels. That's a sign that as a daita d'vedori, he's doing it just to create himself an area where he could thresh in. That's not good for Harisha, because in Harisha you want the entire property to be one flat land. But building yourself areas of flat land, that's perfect to create a grounds for beating grain, which is how they would thresh them. That was one of the methods with which they threshed. So this works anytime we're trying to change ownership of a property. These chazakas would all work. Somebody opened up water in the land. How do you open up water in the land? Again, Zakir Ashbam. So there was probably water around a river or something, and he created an opening so that water will enter the field. So the Allah is a daita d'ara. If he's doing it to irrigate the property, he'll be kaina. But a dat the kavri. But if he just wants to get water in from the river because he's hoping there'll be fish that will come in with it, and they'll be able to catch those fish, again, like honey, because that's not improving the property. Hey, Chadami, how could you tell what it's for? Pasach trei bavi, if he opened up 2 holes, chad ma'ayel, chad mafik, that will allow the river to run through his property, but to leave his property, that's a the cover. Clearly, that's for the fish. He wants the fish to come through his property, so he could literally shoot fish in a barrel. He could catch them as they're running through his property. However, chad bava, if he only opened up 1 because he wants the water to come into the property and stay there, to absorb into the ground and to irrigate, that's a dai to dai. Hahi itza, the ochla dikla b'saf shicha. There's a woman who was eating fruit from a dekel. Going back to the earlier Gemara we had, pruning is only considered a chazaka if you prune evenly all the way around, because that shows you're doing it for the dekel. But if you only prune it on one side, it's because you're interested in chiyusa, you're interested in getting food for your animal, and you just pick from wherever it's most convenient for you. So she ate pears of the dekel just that way, eating it from one side. And you know how long she did this for? For Tleiser Shanin. She was doing this for 13 years. So she was owning this, she thought she owned this Hefker tree that now she was claiming she's doing this for 13 years. But we learned that's not a good chazakah. If you're just doing it to feed your animals, and you're not doing it for the purpose of improving the tree. And we know that because you're only taking from one side, you never had a chazakah, and in fact you never coined it. Also, this smart guy came along, Rafik to Porta, he dug around the property because we know digging is also considered a chazakah. And now the question is, who owns it? Also, lakamei de Levi, v'amri lakamei de Mar Ukva, and ukmei biadei. They took it away from her. They gave it to him because she never made a kinyan. He was the only person who ever made a kinyan. Asai, she came, katav lakamei. She cried in front of the Rav. How could you do that? Amalei told her, I'm really, really sorry. Ma evidlach. What can I possibly do to help you? The loyach sikas, you never were koined because you never made a proper chazakah. So you never were koined, unfortunately, and he was. That's why you should always discuss it with your lawyer before you have a problem, right? You should always discuss it with your accountant before you have a problem. Because if she would have spoken to her lawyer would have said, you better make a proper kinyan, otherwise someone else is going to chop it away. We're usually going to the lawyer after we made the problem, right? People come to you to solve problems after they messed up, right? If they would have done it properly, then it would have saved them.
The problem is
it's the same in my trade, right? It's the same in my trade. I always tell people, first try to fix it yourself. Then by the time you call me, it'll be much bigger. Zog Gemara, I'm looking. I always tell people, if you call me right away, it's $100. If your husband tries to fix it first, it's going to cost you $200.
Okay, give me the right advice.
So this is the method with which this is the manner with which she took from the tree. Like we said earlier, the Pashach Dikla Adaita de Chiyusa is Kula Mechad Gisa. She took it off on one side. The other fellow, after 13 years, came along and was Rafak Tuse Porta. He dug around the tree to aerate the property, to aerate the land. That makes it good for it. The Mahani Lake was real. It helps, just like when you're plowing, that helps for planting. It's a very beneficial thing to aerate the property by digging it up a little bit. So the Rav told her, I'm really sorry. You didn't make a chazaka. Adai the dikla. You didn't do it to benefit the dekel. The hainu mehai gisa. Rather, you were just trying to get pears from the tree, and that's not a valid chazaka. Kavalti. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amarav. Chotzer hatzor tsura v'nichsei ager. You draw a beautiful picture. Now, we had yesterday about pictures, so we're going to have to see. Remember yesterday, we had if you go into a paltrin that's already complete, and you make some type of design out of the plaster, you're koina. And the Gemara told us that design is only a good enough design if it's at least 1 amma by 1 amma, A, and B is it has to be by the entrance, where you notice it right away. But if it's somewhere else in the house, it would have to be a much bigger area of design. Now our Gemara seems to tell us something that's a little bit contradictory. Because that's sort of true, if you draw a picture, it doesn't say how big it is, even a small little picture. So why is that? And not only that, the Gemara says the Rav Lekani Leginsa, the Rav actually was kind of from a Nichse Ager, something that we call Ginsa the Rav, the garden of Rav, and we'll see in the Rishbam what they used it for. You know how he was kind of? So he went and drew a beautiful picture in this Gina, and that's how he was kind of. And we need to know, why is this kind of with a small little picture when you were doing this design in plaster, it had to be a much bigger design. So let's have a look at what the Rashbam says. Hatzor tzura. Tzura is chaya. So you drew a picture of an animal. V'nichse ager b'kais le'bayis on the walls. Yeah. It says tzura is chaya. I guess you're allowed to. Yeah. You know, when my children draw a picture of a fish on the wall, he's not cutting nothing other than a rag to wipe it off.
I thought it was an issue if you start making images.
Yeah, there's a problem of it looks like a I hear. I don't know. Because in the walls of your house. Avosiyud vikir the Amar Lil that we discussed yesterday. There you need ama kineged a pesa. So what type of design is that? Lav hainu tsuras bria. That's not a drawing of an actual creation. It's just nice designs. Maybe it looks like flowers. So it's like a general design. I always visualize like the ceilings. You know, the old ceilings aren't just flat sheetrock. They have this design on it.
There's like geometric. They're not. They don't represent an animal.
That's right. So that's where it needs to be a larger area.
Sun.
That's right. That's right. So for those designs, it has to be a larger area. But even one small picture is also going to be considered something special, and therefore that in and of itself is a chazaka. And therefore, that will be a kinyan no matter where in the house you've drawn this, and no matter what size it is, it would still be a chazaka. The Rav Kana Leginta the Rav. This is an interesting story here. Gina Hasmucha Leves Midrash. Rav had a Bismedrash, and his neighbor was a ger who had his garden. And Rav's neighbor died. The Kana Rav, so Rav right away wanted to be Kana, this property that was Hefker. How was he Kana? The Kak Sha'asa Batsur Lachspa. So if somebody asks you, which one of the Tanoim do we know was a good artist? The answer would be Rav. Because he was Kana, the Gina of his neighbor by drawing a picture, small picture. Now it's interesting because it was a garden. What wall was there to draw? There must have been some type of house in there, which he was quite in. But good to know.
Or did he just lay like seed down in order?
But he didn't. He drew something. He could have taken a shovel and turned over some earth, or he could have locked the door. He could have put a lock on the door. But no, Rav was an artist. He drew a picture. What?
How?
But it says Agina. It says Aginsa. Agina is a garden, right? So Pashas, there would have been something planted there. But he must have, if he drew a picture, where did he draw a picture of a flower? On a flower? So there must have been some type of house in the garden that he used. Yeah, there must be something, maybe in the walls, yeah. Like the graffiti. He did some graffiti. But it's interesting to know that Rav, I don't know if he was a farmer, but he was definitely an artist. Okay. We said over this halacha from Rav that drawing a picture could be kind of something because it's a Maisa Rav. It's the Maisa of Rav himself. Maisa Rav is a journal term used. Sometimes a gadol does something so that we take that as a psak because it's the Maisa Rav. He did it. So this is mamish the Maisa of Rav. He did it, and that's how we know that it's a kinyan. Okay, gewaltig. Itmar. Soda hamesuyemes the mitzarel. I'm just imagining what was going on that day. You have this ger, his neighbor, is on his deathbed, right? And Rav says, "Get me my tools. No, get me my marker. Get me my magic marker. Get me my paintbrush." Because the moment the ger died, Rav had to be machzik. Otherwise, somebody else would have been machzik in it. Gesagt Gemara weiter. So we know when a person's sick and dying, people say tell him for him. When a ger is about to die, everybody's like waiting at the border of his property, waiting to be the first one to make that chazaka. Yeah. Gesagt Gemara. Gesagt Gemara Itmar. Sada hamisuyams b'mitzarel. You have a field that's very clearly delineated. Let's have a peek into the Rashbam. It has a clear border, maybe a fence around all four sides. So it's very, very clearly demarcated. So the halacha is Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Kivan shehikish mechush echad. Even if you do one little dig, kana kula, you're cutting the whole property. What you've done is you've just didn't with that one little dig. You didn't impact the whole property, yet you're cutting the whole property. Shmuel Amar lekana elamokai mechushay belvad. Shmuel has a chiddush to pshat. I think the Rashbam is going to tell us in a minute that we don't pass like Shmuel, even though normally we pass like Shmuel in the Demominus, but you only impact what you dig. So think about it. If you want to now it changes the whole story that we had until now. If you want to be cutting the whole property, you literally got to dig up the whole property. It's not enough just to do one little dig. And so we're going back to the last Amud that we had, but all these different ways to make a chazaka in land, it only works for the area immediately where you are. But we're talking about a property that has a clear border around. Correct. Because when you change a lot, you're protecting the entire property. But digging, you're only being mishbech havet. Exactly. I think that's exactly that. Yeah. Okay. So Zok Helig Gemara, Zok Helig Rishbam. I mean, Ella Makai Mechushu Bavad. This is a huge chiddush of Shmuel. Lakana La Makai Mechushu Bavad. V'davka Nichsei Ager. So right off the bat, this only applies to Nichsei Ager when you're being koine from Hefker and there's no das acheres mak. Avol Mochar the Kibo Zuzi. We know Afilu Eser Sadois Be'eser Medinos. V'hichzik Ba'achas Men Kana Kula. Remember we said Sadu de Arachadoi. It's one big globe. And therefore, if you buy 10 properties from somebody that might be spread out all over the world, and you made a chazaka in one of those properties, you're cutting all 10 because it's one big globe that you're doing your mice in. So that's where it's kanakula. But if our halacha, Shmuel's halacha, that you only kind of connected the improvement that you made, that applies only when you're being kind of from Hefker. Kedama Shmuel, the Pirkei Kamoi, the Bavakama, the Kedushin, the Prishal Il, V'hach Pelukta, Hilchas HaKarav. Here the Rashbam tells us that in this Shaila, the Halachas HaKarav, because that one digging in a property will become a whole property. How does the Rashbam know that we pass like Rav? The Rav Nachman Avad Uvda Kavasei, the Rav L'Kamam B'Shmaitim. We're shortly going to learn that Rav Nachman paskin like Rav, and we pass like Rav Nachman Bedin. So even though normally we pass like Shmuel and Hilchos Choshen Mishpat, but in this case, Zok Rashbam, we're going to pass like Rav because Rav Nachman agreed. Zok Gemara. Now this is a very interesting Rashbam we're about to learn. The She'enim Mesuyemes. What if it's a field that does not have it's not clearly delineated. It's like Rashi, like the Rashbam says, it's a big valley. And there's other fields all around my field, or there's a Rosh Hashanah, but there's no clear gate around the four borders of my field. So at Kaaba, if you look at the Gemara itself, the way we would alpha touch is at Kama means if you did one dig, how much are you going to be cutting? Right? Because that's the question. But the Rashbam does not learn Pshat in the Gemara that way. The Rashbam says, you know what at Kama means? At Kama tzarech lachpor v'yikna kula aliba de Rav. According to Rav, who holds that you only have to do one dig, he said one dig in a bordered property, in a clearly marked property, will be cutting the whole thing. But what if it's not a clearly marked property? How much would you have to dig in order to be cutting the whole property? So we're literally changing the subject and talking about something completely different. So if it's a bordered property and do one dig, so automatically you're cutting the whole property that's clearly marked as that one unit. But if you're in a place where nothing's marked, so how much are you cutting for every dig? No, that's not the Shaila. That's what I thought the Shaila is. Raj saying the Shaila is, the Rashbam saying the Shaila is, how will I be cutting the whole property? I'll tell you what you do. What you do is as follows. Let's say this property is 500 amas by 500 amas. Let's say that's the borders of the property. So what you do is, normally what they would do is when they would plow, they would take a pair of oxen, connect it to a plow, and literally go from one end to the other end of the property, and then they would turn around and go back, and they would go back and forth, similar to the way you might mow a lawn, not the way a Zamboni cleans the ice. Because a Zamboni cleans the ice by going around the perimeter, but that's not how it was. That's not how they plowed. They went one road and another road. So let's just say there's east-west, there's north-south, whichever way he was going. Let's say he was going from east to west. So if he does 2 rows from east to west, right, working his way from the south side of the property towards the north, once he does 2 full rows, then he's coining the whole property. That's how the Rashbam learns. But the Rashbam does not tell us what one dig would do. The Rashbam just tells us, if you want to be coining the whole property, this is what you should do. So Tosfos doesn't like the Rashbam, because that's not the pashtus of how you would read the Gemara. So let's see Tosfos. That's exactly what the subject is. With one dig in a property without borders, how much would you be koine? Zok the Tosfos, the Gemara says, "Kida ozol tyre the turin v'hada." What does that mean? Pirish kishir midas telem. You don't have to go from one end of the property till the other end of the property. There was a certain distance that they would go per row. Now, let's say your property was 2 miles long. You're not going to take your plow rig and run 2 miles there and 2 miles back. You would break it up into smaller grids. Let's say the typical run of a plow would be 500 amas, let's say. So if you go 500 amas there and back, then that's how much you'll be koine with one dig. So Dr. Tosfos weiter, it was known what the typical farmer did, how long in a row did he go before he turned around. In other words, how he cut his grids up to split up his property. If you had a long field that was 2 miles long, they wouldn't have 2 mile long rows. He would go 500 feet and go back. He would focus on grids. I disagree with the Rashbam, who said, "Kishayachrish semed bakar shura achas miktzei gvul sadeu at kitzeyu umitoich kach koine kolasada." I don't agree with the Rashbam. First of all, the Lashon Gemara is not mashma that way, because that's not what it's asking. It's asking, if you do one dig, how much are you koine? So it tells you you're koine the amount of property that would be a typical row of a plow. Another reason why I don't like to respond shot, that my boy v'hada. Why do you need that you go there and back? Rak kishiyachreish pamachas avagav deloyada. Why shouldn't it be that if you go from one end to the other end, you're showing this is the width of my field? That should be enough. Why do you need to go back? The way I'm learning is you're koine that amount of property. The amount of property of one row there and back, that's how much property you'll be koine with one dig. So that means that maybe, let's say a row is like 5 feet. So every 10 feet, you got to do a dig, and then you'll be koine all property. Okay, Gavalti.
You have to go west, for the full length.
Or north, south, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, but then that's fine. But how much of the, if you go east-west, how much of the north-south?
So the Rashbam explains, if let's say it's 500 amas by 500 amas, and you do one east-west there and back, you're cutting the whole north-south. Because once you show the width of the property, you're cutting the whole length.
What's the whole north-south?
Whatever. No,
where does it stop?
No, wherever. Even though we don't have borders, we do know what's the neighbor's property and what's not. Now, even if there's no fence around it, the surveyor will still know what's his property, right? He also knew. Now, that's also the point. The fact that he went from one end of the property to the other end of the property shows that it's obviously known what the borders are, just because there's no fence there.
Two questions. One, with going like the 2 miles example that you used, are we talking that it's a larger square property that you'd have to transverse it? Otherwise, what would be the benefit of doing that? If it's a long rectangle property, why not just do, if it's east-west is the long way, north-south, why not just do a quick north-south? And it'd be a lot less of a tear cut to do it.
I hear. No, just do it in the other direction where each run is shorter. Very good point.
Exactly.
That's why I said grids, because it's probably it's a huge square, so therefore he's breaking it up into smaller grids.
And the
That's-
second thing, the 2 rows, is it making it similar, like opinion of like an orchard where you have to have 2 rows in order for it to actually?
You mean, Karen is only
Yeah,
called a Karen if there's two
exactly.
rows.
So why is it 2 rows? Is it
I think it's just an assessment of what shows
just going
ownership,
back?
what shows ownership. So it's hard to, this is something that you can't learn on YouTube. You need the Gemara to tell us what's a manifestation of what. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Let me just focus on the end of the Rishbam. If you look at the side where it says Hagayis Habach, so if we move right over into the Rishbam at that level, and we're looking at the Rishbam, the last word on the line is the Kiva. The Kiva on the Charash, Shtei Shuros, Al Panei Kol Oyer Chasada, Oyal Kol Rachboi. So clearly the Rishbam is learning it's a rectangle, right? Once you do 2 full rows from one end of the property to the other end of the property, Ki Ilu Charash Kula. We look at it like you plowed the entire property. You clearly showed ownership from one end to the other end, even though you only showed ownership on the east-west, not on the north-south, but Aval Pikain, that's what it looked at. The nechasim of an evet of a goy is like a midbar. It's like hefker. What does that mean? Whoever Zoichenit is whoever's machzichenit is Zoichenit. And the Rishbam tells us that there's more to the story. So let's have a quick look. Let's have a quick look at the Rishbam. You can't just go and take a goy's property. So it's referring to Yisrael. A Yisrael goes to a goy and he purchases a property. How does he purchase a property? He pays for it. So he wants to buy this field and he gives the goy $100,000. The guy accepted the money from the Yid, but Yisrael. So now we're in a very dangerous twilight zone. The guy has relinquished his ownership of the property the moment he received the money. For a guy, Kinyan Kesef works, but the Yisrael can't be koine. The Yisrael needs to be machzik the karka to be able to be koine. So I paid for it. It's relinquished from the goy, but it's not yet belonging to me until I make a chazaka. That's a very dangerous zone to be in because anybody can now come and seize it. Harehen Kamidbar Hefker. They have a status of Hefker. Kedimafarish Lakamon. The Gemara is going to explain in just a moment. Shem Kadam Yisrael Acher V'Hechzik Bam. If some other Yid came and made a chazaka in the property before the buyer had a chance, Kana Ki'ilu Hein Nichsei Ger Shemeis. They have the same status of Nichsei Ger Shemeis. They're Hefker, which causes a great problem for the buyer. Imagine he pays all this money and he might end up not having the karka. So what is the recourse? There are those who learn that the guy who came and made the chazaka has to at least pay me for my purchase price. It's not true. It's not true. The McCain Mai Harayan Kamidbar. Harayan Kamidbar means they're hefker. And the lekeach who spent $100,000 by the guy to buy it, he's out of luck. If the Yid can somehow get a refund from the guy, he should do it. If not, he is going to lose out. Umiu Zok the Rashbam, the guy who sees the property is no tzaddik. Umiu Nir Be'enai, the Hai Sheni, Rasha Mikri, this Sheni is a Rasha. The Kivin the Yav Lakeach Risha and Zuzi, once I already paid the guy for the property, how dare you go take it? Legara me oniya mahapech becharara uba achar benotla the mikri rasha hahu ach. If I'm in the middle of negotiating on the sale, someone comes and chops it away. Legally, he was kanyat, but he's a Russian. So here, it's no worse than that. I'm clearly negotiating on the field, and you go chop it away, you're a Russian. But I don't have any recourse. So that's a very interesting situation where you're doing business with a guy. Make sure to quickly make a chazaka on the field as soon as you pay for it, because during that time you're in great danger. So let's have a look again. My timer. Oivik Echavim Mechimati Zuzul Yodei Istalically, the goy gives up his ownership in it the moment he receives any money. And the Rashbam says, Istalically Oivik Echavim Sharei Kol Kinyonoi Shal Oivik Echavim Bekesef. The kinyan of a goy is kesef, and therefore, Umishakibel Amois Legabedidei have a Mechira Gemura She'ein Yechoilon Oid Lachser Zebozeh. Once a goy is makabel money, that's an irrevocable sale from his perspective. But the Yisrael lakani b'matan mois ad also shtar liyodei. But a Yisrael is not koina until he reaches the star. It's speaking about a star over there. Kedamina b'kedushin uchetaprishas leil. So therefore, the Yid has to actually make a kinyan. It's not enough to rely on the kinyan kesef. So that means the goy already relinquished his ownership. Yisrael back into the Gemara. Yisrael lakani ad the moti shtar liyodei. Hilchach, therefore, Harei and Kimidbar, they're considered hefker. So Amar Abai Rabbi Yosef. Abai told Rabbi Yosef, it's impossible that Shmuel said this. Why? Very interesting Gemara over here. The Amar Shmuel Dina da Mechusa Dina. Did Shmuel not once paskin that Dina da Mechusa Dina, we follow the laws of the state? Umalka Omar, you know what the state says? Loy likni ara ela be'igrita. You're not koina unless you have the star. Unless you have the star that says that you bought it from the previous owner. And if that's the case, no one should be able to seize it. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. It's halacha. You have to follow it. Shekol b'nei hamalchus makablim aleim mirtzoinam ukei hamelech v'mishpatim. People accept upon themselves the rules and laws that the country develops. Ve'ilach din gomeru, it's halacha l'maisa, and therefore ve'ein lahachzik b'mamet chaveiroi. You're not allowed to take money that belongs to your friend al pi choik hamelech hanog be'ir mishum gezel. If it's your friend's money by law, by secular law, you're not allowed to take it. That's called stealing. And by secular law, this property belongs to the person who paid the goy. How do we know that? Talk to Rashbam. Umalko Amar lo leichel ira shum machzik bara elam kain yesh biyodoi shtar mechir ben hamoicher. The Malchus said that even though you made a chazaka, we don't care. You have to have the deed. You have to have the sale shtar, which the first person who paid for it has it. So how could you tell me that Shmuel said that I'm in danger, some other you can come take it away? Shmuel says Dina da Mechusa Dina, and Dina da Mechusa dictates that this belongs to the person who bought it. How could this guy be koinit who comes and makes the chazaka? Who has the star? As soon as he has the star from the guy who he bought it from, it's his property. So how could you tell me Shmuel says that anybody else can go and take it? Zok to Gemara, Amar Lei. So this is what Abai asked Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef defended Shmuel's halacha, not by answering the question. We'll get to the answer to the question later, but by proving it from something else that Shmuel did. Amar Lei, Analo Yadana. I don't know anything about your kasha. I'm going to tell you Uvdahab. I'll tell you a story that happened. With Dura de Rusa, in the city of Dura de Rusa, Yisrael the Zovan Aram a Yid bought a land from a guy, but also Yisrael Akrina and Yerovik Baporta, exactly this case, also the Kamed Rabbi Yehuda, and they came to Rabbi Yehuda and they wanted to know, the Yid who bought it, is it his or is it the Yid who made the chazak? And you know what Rabbi Yehuda paskined? Ukma b'yadu d'sheni. So you're asking me Dina Mechusa. I don't know if I'm Dina Mechusa right now. I'm going to tell you a story that actually happened. That Rabbi Yehuda paskined that it goes into the hand of the second guy. So Abaye said, don't bring me a rye from that story. That story is very different. You're talking about that city. There, it was a place where people would conceal their land to avoid paying property tax. The Inugufayu lo yahavu task the malka. The original owner, the vendor, never paid taxes. Umalka Omar, and the Dina da Mechusa Dina there was Mandiyoy Taska Lechalara. The king said, whoever pays the yearly tax for this property, it's his property. So what happened is, you know why they gave it to the second guy? Because the second guy came along and paid tax. Even the owner, forget the Yid who bought it, even the owner didn't pay tax. So the moment the second guy started paying tax or committed to the king that he's going to pay the tax, automatically it becomes his. So don't tell me if you went to the second guy to do master, the first guy wasn't kind of, nobody was kind of over there. That's a whole different story. That's the story of the guy who paid tax. So Oibazoi, we're back to our kasha. How could Shmuel say? It goes to the second guy. Dina de Malchusa Dina, in a normal case, where there's no issue with tax, says that it goes to the person who's holding the shtar. So that was the kasha. Rabbi Yosef tried to divert it by bringing a raya from a story. But how does Rabbi Yosef deal with this stira? So the Rishonim tell us the way Rabbi Yosef deals with it is very simple. He actually argued with Rabbi about what the din of Mechusa was. He said there was not a law there. The law over there was that the person who makes the chazaka gets it. You're asking me Abai Akasha that din of Mechusa says it goes with the star. I think you're not informed properly. That was not the din of Mechusa there. So I agree with you, din of Mechusa, but you have to know what the law is. You didn't read the law books. The law books does not say that the person who has the star gets it. And that's why you can go Basra, the person who made the chazak. Rav Huna Zovin Arama Evit B'Chav. Rav Huna bought a land from a guy. Also Yisrael Acher Rafik Baporta. Exactly this scenario, which is the scenario that the Rashbam was referring to in Amar Aleph. How we know that you passed on like Shmuel. And what happened? Also the Kameder of Nachman Ukabiyode. So this Gemara cited this story Lagabe de Shaila of the guy is nechasim becoming hefker after he accepts money, and therefore anyone who makes a chazaka will be kind of right. Also, Rav Nachman ukmiyode Amar lei my daitach the Amar Shmuel nichse oivit gechavim harehem kemidba b'chalamaskim zacha. Why is it that Rav Nachman, have granted me the property, even though somebody else made a chazaka? Right, that was the case over here. Rav Huna bought it, but he didn't make the chazaka. Somebody else made the chazaka, and Rav Nachman gave it to him. I'm sorry, Rav Nachman didn't give it to him. Rav Nachman gave it to the other guy. So Rav Huna says, "Why give it to the other guy? Are you passing like Shmuel? You're giving it to the other guy because the other guy made a chazaka first. But you got to be consistent, Rav Huna. If you're going to pass like Shmuel, there's something else I want to remind you that Shmuel said. You know what else Shmuel said? Shmuel said, Shmuel also said that if a guy digs, that chazaka is only kanya where he dug. So give him, if you want to give him, because he made a chazaka, because of Shmuel, we'll give him what Shmuel said he would be kanya with the chazaka, just where he dug. Because that takes us back to the way we started the Gemara with Shmuel at the beginning, who says that you're only cutting the little bit that you dig. Okay, so I'm a loser. I wasn't maxing fast enough. He came first because of Shmuel. But Shmuel also said he only gets that little bit, so only give him that little bit. Omerlei, so you know what Rav Nachman answered? Bahai ano hishmaitz and severely the Omer Afuna Omerav Kivan Shenichish B'Machush Echad Kanakula. Like Abedat, I hold like Rav. So Rav Nachman said, I have my own individual psak. I pass like Shmuel that the guy who was maxing gets to keep it, and I pass like Rav that digging in one area is going to the whole field. So this is what the Rashba meant when he told us on Amar Aleph. You see clearly from Rav Nachman that he passes like Rav that one dig will be going to the entire property. Gewaltig. It's beautiful how at the last line of the Gemara it brings the whole Gemara together. That what we learned it refers back to the old thing. So one psak of Rav Nachman addresses the two shilas that we had today. A is a little dig will be coming to the whole property like Rav, not like Shmuel, but we do all like Shmuel, that once you give kesef to a goy, he's relinquishing his ownership. And therefore, anybody who wants to make a chazaka can make a chazaka. And in fact, that's why Rav Huna lost his property. So I just want to mention, Dina de Malchusa Dina is a very serious thing. Rabbi Lowy always gives a shmuz, and people don't like wearing seatbelts. People like speeding. But he said, Dina de Malchusa Dina says you have to follow. And I know Rav Heinemann is makbid not to speed. He holds it's usher midaraisa to speed because Dina de Malchusa Dina. So he will not speed. He follows laws because it's Dina de Malchusa Dina. The only time you don't say Dina de Malchusa Dina is if they make rules that are bedavke against Eden. But if they make rules for everybody and we're equal, we have to follow the halachas. So Baruch Heinemann, Rabbi Heinemann's oldest son, was in my class. So he used to tell us interesting stories that his father used to do. So his father believes you're not allowed to speed.
Where was the class?
In Philadelphia. And the problem is that he once got a speeding ticket. Rabbi Heinemann held you in,
Not the
not in Israel, Baltimore, no. We went to Philadelphia. So what happened was, is his father once got a speeding ticket, but his father does not speed. His father's a very big genius. So his father had to fight he decided he's going to fight the ticket in court. And I don't know if you remember, the predecessor to the Nissan was the Datsun. Remember the Datsuns when they first came out? So his father drove a tiny little Datsun with probably like a half a cylinder engine or something, stick shift. So he got up in front of the judge and he brought the topography of the area where he got a speeding ticket. He got a speeding ticket at the top of a hill, and there was a red light at the bottom of the hill. And he showed, based on the horsepower and the torque of the engine, based on the distance and the slope, that it was physically impossible for his car to have reached the speed that the officer claimed it reached in that period of time. So he said he literally had to take a big chalkboard with all these physics formulas, and he won the case. I'm not sure if he won the case because the judge understood his proof, or if the judge just, you know what, just get out of here. But he won the case.
He wanted to repair his own cars.
Yes.